Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the concepts of tone and mood. I'm sure as a high school English student you are familiar with these words, or at least you've seen them around, dotted around your questions in English exam papers, and I'm sure you've also heard your English teachers talk at length about tone and mood. But I know sometimes there is a misconception in terms of what tone and mood exactly are, and also what the differences between these two concepts are. So in today's video, we're going to unpack what tone and mood are. We're going to also discuss how to answer questions on tone and mood, and also how you can harness the power of tone and mood in your own writing. So put very simply, tone is the attitude of the writer towards the material or towards the theme. So whenever you receive a text, always read the text, understand what the main message is, and then think to yourself, what is my writer's attitude towards this particular concept? And mood, put simply, is the atmosphere of the text. So it's how the reader is made to feel about a text. Well, not really about a text actually, but more about the subject matter. So as you can see, tone and mood are not completely different from each other. They are quite similar because the writer's attitude is going to make the reader feel a similar way towards that subject matter. However, you can also notice there is a distinction between tone and mood. They are not identical. So as I alluded to before, you need to understand tone and mood in terms of when you're analysing poetry, comprehension texts, or even visual texts such as advertisements or cartoons. So you need to understand how that speaker or how that writer is conveying their tone and mood. And we're going to talk about how we're going to figure out what the tone and mood are once we actually discuss what words we need to be using to describe tone and mood. And then secondly, as I mentioned earlier, essays and transactional writing, if you have a good knowledge of tone and mood, then you can really harness that power and use those same techniques that other writers use to write, for instance, comprehension texts. You can use those ideas and those strategies and those skills to help your essays and transactional writing actually give over the desired messaging. So when it comes to answering questions on, poetry and comprehension text and visual text, and when your teacher asks you, please will you explain the tone or the mood, remember that we need to be giving an adjective because we are describing a concept. We're describing the writer's attitude, or we're describing the atmosphere of a text. But so often, students write these very vague adjectives to describe the tone and the mood of the text, which really does them no favors, and some teachers are not even going to award marks for that. Why is that? It's because these adjectives are not descriptive enough. They are too vague. They don't actually show that you really understand the writer's attitude or the atmosphere of the text. So words such as happy, sad, good, bad, kind, mean, positive, negative, these are words that younger students can use to describe the writer's attitude. But as a high schooler, you need to go deeper. So you need to understand that you don't just have a positive tone, but that there are many different positive tones within that sort of framework, right? So if you just say positive, it's not being specific enough and you're not showing off your knowledge, because positive could mean perhaps joyous, or it could mean excited, or it could mean celebratory, or it could even mean passionate, right? All of these words are positive words, and so your teacher is not going to be happy if you're just going to say, oh, it's a happy tone, or it's a positive tone, or a negative tone, because they want to see, really, can you actually differentiate what type of tone it is, what type of positive tone it is, or what type of negative mood it is. So the big tip over here is to really be specific when you're answering your questions, and remember to use an adjective always to describe your tone or the mood of a text. Okay, so I know this looks very overwhelming, lots of words on the page, but these are these are tone and mood words. These are adjectives that are actually specific and that can actually get you the marks that you need when you are trying to identify in a comprehension text or in a poem what the tone of what the writer's attitude is, what the tone is, or what the mood is, what is the writer's feeling, the reader's feeling, what is the atmosphere of the text. So if you go online and you search tone and mood words, you are going to find a plethora of words to use that you can study. I have chosen sort of my favorites and have put them on this page. I've stayed away from ones that are really quite challenging and very sort of complicated words, although there might be a couple in here that you may not be you may not know of. So my suggestion is to take these words and to actually go ahead and Google them, search them so you understand what they mean. And another reason why I've selected these particular words is that they're not too specific that they only apply to like one poem out of 100. These are words that you can use for tone and mood of many different texts that I've encountered as a teacher and that my students have encountered as high schoolers. So let's quickly go through all these words. We have celebratory, joyous, excited, admiring, passionate, earnest, eager, animated, ardent, compassionate, dismissive, matter of fact, indifferent, uncertain, defiant, angry, critical, condescending, conversational, depressing, encouraging, disheartening, mournful, hopeful, annoyed, candid, assertive, confident, aggressive, scathing, empathetic, frustrated, informative, mocking, nostalgic, sincere, melancholic, optimistic, pessimistic, regretful, sarcastic, urgent, empowered, reflective, contemplative, foreboding, apprehensive, dejected, disappointed, determined, and cynical. So I hope that you know a couple of these words, and as I said, if you don't, I would suggest that you go and search them, that you write them down on a piece of paper, and when you are answering past paper questions and when you're practicing, try and incorporate these words into your answers. There's no, part of English. I think there's sometimes this understanding that you can't really study for a language. That is definitely not true. This is what you need to study in order to get those tone and mood marks in your questions in your paper 1 comprehension texts and poetry answering for paper 1 or paper 2. So make sure that you study these words and that you understand what they mean and that you have them at your disposal. So when you're sitting in an exam and you have to come up with a word to describe the tone and the mood of a text, you're not sort of just thinking of random words. You have a list in your head that you can go to and turn to and be like, okay, this writer, he sounds frustrated, his attitude is frustrated, and then you've got a brilliant word to use. Another suggestion is whenever you're answering a question for tone and mood, always provide at least 2 or even 3 different tone and mood words, just to make sure you've got the right answer in there for your teacher to see. Okay, so now we understand what words we need to be using to describe the tone and the mood, and we recognize that we have to be specific about it. But then the question still remains of how do we honestly figure out the tone and the mood of a text? So let's go through a couple of things that come up, and you can see the ... at the bottom over here because there's so many different things that are going to alert us to the tone and the mood of a text. But these are some of the most, the ones that crop up the most often that we need to be aware of. So remember that tone and mood are very context dependent. So for instance, if you're studying a poem, try and think of what is the writer's background, what is the poet speaking of, what is the theme. And once you can understand the theme or the context of a text, then it's very clear that the tone is going to shift in one way or another way. I know I've spoken about, not using positive and negative because these are too vague, these words. But this is sort of, in my opinion, a nice first step is in your head to think about or to put in your brain, is this tone and mood negative or is it positive? And once you've understanding which one it's into, which sort of camp it falls into, sometimes it could even be in the neutral camp, then you can start becoming more specific in terms of what tone and mood words you're going to be using. So remember to look at your context. Is this set at a funeral? Okay, then it's probably going to have some sort of mournful tone and depressing mood, right? If you think about it, it's set at a party, then it's going to have a very different perspective. A very important thing to look out for to help you understand the tone and mood of a text is the diction. The diction is the choice of words, because if you're going to use words with connotations of joy, then your tone is going to lean in that direction as well as your mood. If you're going to choose diction with connotations of despair or hopelessness, then your tone and your mood is going to lean in that direction. And this is what I'm talking about when we are discussing things like, or when we discussed earlier, not just even identifying tone and mood, but harnessing the power of tone and mood. So when you're writing a piece, maybe it's a creative essay and you're trying to sound really hopeless, then you need to make sure that the word choice that you're using is indicative of that tone that you have towards the subject material and the mood that you're trying to create. The next thing on the list might look confusing at first, but I've written there tone and mood because If you know the mood of a poem, then you can probably figure out its tone pretty easily. If you know the tone of a comprehension text, then the mood goes hand in hand with it. Pronouns. So have a look at pronouns. These are quite important. The pronouns that I'm talking about here are particularly things like first person pronouns, second person pronouns, inclusive pronouns, or exclusive pronouns. These types of pronouns are going to give an indication of how the writer is approaching the subject material and could give you hints about the tone and the mood. If you're seeing a lot of inclusive pronouns like we, us, and our, you're going to notice that the tone is probably could be uplifting, perhaps, right? Trying to unite everyone and show this, the writer's, the attitude or the mood actually is more uplifting and the tone is quite encouraging. So have a look at your pronouns to understand the tone and the mood. Then we have punctuation. So think about the very basic thing that you learned in like grade 2 or grade 3. If you see an exclamation mark, right, it's probably showing some sort of passion, some sort of ardor. So remember that if you see punctuation marks, if you're noticing them, if they're very sort of in your face, then that can lead to the tone and the mood. Sentence style or sentence structure, also really important. If you're seeing a lot of simple sentences or even a lot of short sentences, the tone can typically come across as quite direct. Sometimes it can even come across as harsh. The mood can therefore be quite commanding. And then we have figures of speech. So have a look at your figures of speech, especially in poetry, but they do come up, even idiomatic expressions, for instance. They come up in, comprehension texts and all different kinds of other texts. And from there, you can ascertain what is the writer's attitude towards this, what is the mood that is being created. So I thought that we could quickly go through a little example so I can show you how to analyze what the tone is, how to analyze what the mood is, and what the difference is. So I've taken an extract from a very famous poem by William Blake called London, and I'm just going to read the stanza quickly, and then we're going to talk about how we can ascertain or how we can figure out the tone and the mood. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. So immediately something that I notice over here is I'm noticing the diction. I'm noticing the word cry, appalls, hapless, blood, or actually that's more imagery, even blood. And we can see all those words are really steering me towards the negative camp. And if I think more deeply about this, it's not merely just sad, right? Do you see how sad just wouldn't cut it here because it doesn't actually express the full extent of the meaning and the despair behind the tone and mood of this particular extract. So to me, the attitude of the writer over here, the tone of the poem, could be described as mournful, dejected, reflective, and depressing. He's reflecting on this particular situation of London being in this terrible state, and he's quite mournful and he feels pretty depressed by it all. And therefore the mood, which remember is going to align with it but be slightly different. How do I feel as the reader? What is the atmosphere? Well, the atmosphere that is created is incredibly hopeless. It is depressing. It is melancholic. Melancholic is like a fancier word for sad. So do you see how the hopelessness of the mood is created by the diction and also the mournfulness of the tone? Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video helpful. Please remember to like this video and to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.